Can you actually get a great sounding drum recording with an affordable mic setup? Today we're finding out with the Phoenix Pro PDM36, a boundary condenser mic designed to simplify your recording process and give you that deep, punchy low end. Now, this video is sponsored by Phoenix Pro, but as always, all thoughts are my own, and I'll include plenty of demos processed and unprocessed so that you can actually hear what this mic sounds like in different contexts. They also sent over their PTD10 drum mic kit to capture the rest of the kit, so I'll make sure everything that I use in this video is linked down below if you want to check it out. So the PDM36 is a boundary condenser microphone primarily designed for kick drums and other low frequency sources. It has a supercardioid pattern, which basically means it's very focused on whatever you point it at and is very good at rejecting background noise and such. It has a two-way switch so you can toggle between a flat mode and a kick tuned mode, which adds an EQ curve to give a bit more punch to your low end. The switch, in my opinion, is a bit too recessed, so at least for me, I could not flip the switch without using a little pin or something similar. This probably isn't a big deal as you're likely going to have this set either one way or the other most of the time. You of course have an XLR out on the mic and a little pouch to store it in. If you're not familiar with boundary mics, you may notice that there's not a way to mount this to a mic stand, and that's because these are designed to sit on a surface in front of the source it's picking up. So let me just show you exactly how I'm setting it up for these demos. So I actually used this on a bass amp for this demo and experimented a bit. On the kick drum, I ended up taking the reso head off for this, honestly for ease. I know a ton of people who will put a hole in their reso head, and if you do that, you literally can just reach in there and set the PDM36 inside, but leaving your head off is very common in studio recordings as well, so that's what I'm going with here. I found that having the PDM36 right inside of the shell, a bit far away from the beater, yielded the best result for me, but I would encourage you to experiment for yourself as you would when placing any other mic. I should also note here that the blanket is just for a bit of muffling, and I sort of folded it underneath itself so that the microphone wouldn't bury itself down in the blanket. On the rest of the kit, I'm using the PTD10 mic kit, also by Phoenix Pro, including the kick mic on the outside of the kick, which you'll get to hear what it sounds like with and without that mic. And in case you're wondering, this entire kit is a Gretsch Energy, which is a very affordable all-in-one drum kit. Even the hardware and cymbals came with it, so let's hear it in action. So I gotta admit, it took me a bit of experimenting when trying to get a good sound out of the PDM36. In my case, I was putting it way too close to the beater at first, so it just sounded like a slap without the actual beef you'd want from a kick drum. And maybe you can hear it in the demo, but the kick out mic that I'm using does seem to complement that side of things, even though moving the PDM36 back significantly did a really good job and could be used on its own. As far as the build quality goes, this is a very heavy-duty mic. It seems like the whole thing is a very sturdy metal design. If you know what you're doing, this can be a very easy, minimal way of miking up a kick in the studio, or even more so for a live gig where it's maybe more important to have a streamlined setup. Again, you can decide based on what you hear. I also want to give some quick thoughts on the PTD10 mic kit. These were incredibly easy to set up and get a good sound out of. The kit comes with a PDM33 kick mic, 4 of these PDM34s for the snare and toms, and 2 PDM35s, which are the condenser mics I'm using on the overheads. They all feel like really sturdy mics. And of course you get all of the included clips and mounts you need to get going with these, as well as a travel case to carry everything in, which is pretty sick if you travel with these or just want a solid place to store them if you're using a different mic setup. I will say that the clips for the snare and tom mics seem to be very sturdy, but I was kind of scared to bend this little piece back enough to mount it to my drums, as it really has some resistance to it. This concerned me at first, but after I got the first one on, I got a bit more bold with the rest of them and didn't feel like any of them were gonna snap. And just to make sure we're on the same page, you can buy all of these mics separately, or buy the PTD10, which is the 7 mic setup I just talked about. This does not include the PDM36 boundary mic, so if you end up wanting a PDM36 for your kick and just a few of those other mics, you can sort of configure them however you want to if you buy them separately. So just to consolidate my main thoughts and put them all in one place, the things I love about all of these mics, including the PDM36. They feel really solid, sound great for the price, are straightforward to use, and all come with a travel/storage solution. Things I'd like to see in a future iteration of these mics. If you could bring out the two-way switch on the PDM36 just enough to be able to move it with your finger, but not far enough to touch the surface that it's on, that would be excellent. And on the other mics, I had a bit of a hard time getting the XLRs to engage the locking mechanism when plugging them in, but that's not a big deal in my opinion, as I'm not moving around with these mics, but I'd be curious to know if other people have had the same experience. Overall, I think these mics are an incredible value for the money, and that may sound like a real salesy thing to say, but we're talking about the PDM36, which as of right now is $72.99 US, and the PTD10 is only $179.99. So I don't think it takes much to say that this is a great value if you, after hearing the demos, like the way they sound. If it says anything to you, this is going to continue to be my drum mic setup, and you'll hear even more of these mics in my music, future videos, and possibly even sample packs. And that is not something that I told Phoenix Pro I would do. I just think these are great so far, so I have no reason to upgrade anytime soon. If you want to check them out for yourself, there are links in the description. If you made it this far into the video, consider hitting that like button and subscribing if you haven't already. If you want to watch more of my videos, I'll put a couple of recommendations on the screen. And as always, thanks for hanging out.